I guess we can kick off the session. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to many of our guests tuning in from across the world. Today, we're going to be kicking off the fifth session of the SRTI Park Industry Labs with the focus on emerging oil and gas technologies. Our guest speakers today are Mr. David Miller. He's the TechX Director from the Oil and Gas Center from Aberdeen, and Mr. Shimon Zaman, who is an expert in the field and now is he's an entrepreneur in robotics. Just an overview on what's going on here in the MENA region. Obviously, what happened with COVID over the past couple of months saw a huge spike in the, let's say, the request for renewable energy. And this kind of kicked off the need to look into alternative solutions to the standard traditional oil and gas, which have been, especially here in the MENA region, which we have been used to over the past couple of years. If anyone has been attentive to the news, ADNOC's recent announcement of the almost $20 billion on the infrastructure deal just is a slight indication to what the opportunity is on a high level across the region for all the innovation ventures across the industry in the oil and gas space. And a little bit of a focus on where Sharjah is today. Sharjah is home to top companies when it comes to oil and gas, especially when it comes to the upstream and integrated oil and gas companies such as Dana Gas, Crescent Petroleum, Petrofac, Lamprel, Eni, and the Sharjah National Oil Company. So when it comes to an ecosystem which is kind of built for fostering such innovation, this is exactly what we try to portray, is that the Sharjah city is also home to large oil and gas companies which can be beneficial to these new energy or new tech ventures. Which kicks into where we are today as the Sharjah Research and Technology Park, and Sharjah in general, as why it's a hub for the R&D and education innovation. So Sharjah primarily invests in education and academia and culture, and this has been a focus for them for the past 40 years, especially with the direction of His Highness, who's also the chairman of the park. And it's our focus at the park really to, let's say, build an ecosystem and attract ventures from across the world who want to be part of this ecosystem so they can scale across the region. And the Sharjah Research and Technology Park is one of the only and unique ecosystems across the region, which is primarily organically grown from the universities, especially the American University of Sharjah. So we have a few mandates. Building an innovation ecosystem, this is our first and foremost point. This is both by attracting like-minded ventures and at the same time creating or stimulating venture creation here in the UAE, to be able to be implemented across the region. And naturally, once you achieve that first point, generate employment, with the access to the talent that we have here in Sharjah, catalyze towards a knowledge economy, which is a very high point, very high up on the agenda for the UAE government, which is transitioning away from the oil-based economy and towards a knowledge economy. And we are primarily at the forefront of that, supporting that vision. For the past few years, the team has been building relations with various innovation ecosystems, science parks, universities, research centers. For the moment of where we are today, we need to build and continuously build various collaborations with international ecosystems so we can spur this tech transfer and knowledge transfer between us. We are directly related to the American University of Sharjah, one of the top education institutes in the region, which is also very forward-thinking in the research arms. And we are extremely aligned to them, not only in the research areas that they focus on, but in terms of tapping into the talent and being able to support them to commercialize research and spin-off ventures, hopefully in the future. On a high level, we focus on 6 verticals, in addition to biotech. These days, this is another organically grown sector focus that we're focusing on. Water, environmental, renewable, digitization, mobility, and smart cities. And the figures that you see on the screen are are mildly conservative compared to what the actual opportunities are. And we like to focus on these, and they need much attention in the region. And this is the attention that we're giving all the ventures that want to venture in and scale their technologies or their innovations via our ecosystem, which we've built today. A few sample, we're going to be showing you a couple of examples of different park members today at the park. So we have around 50 companies that joined us over the past year. Each one of them brings an incredible value to the ecosystem. They're very forward-thinking companies that we have supported them to plug in and scale across the region. Merlin Technologies is one of them. They're actually in our backyard. I'm looking at their facility here. They're in various agri-tech and renewable techs, which they've developed themselves, and they're supporting the food security ambition in the UAE. Virtue is a Spanish artificial intelligence, which is focusing on emotional intelligence. Nupta Health is one of the leading women's hybrid health tech platforms, which are also based here at the park. And this is one to watch out for. They're incredibly innovative in what they're doing, and they're going to be one of the fastest growing health tech companies in the region. In our headquarters, we have a state-of-the-art AR and VR experiential center, which will be there. So think about applications in the oil and gas, for example, doing maintenance in an offshore grid without actually being in the offshore grid. I actually did the training for putting off a fire in an offshore grid, and it was quite informative. So if someone like me can do it, then I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of things to be achieved from this center. Civil Twin are a Spanish photovoltaics R&D center. They're going to be plotting up a, let's say, like a mini R&D hub for photovoltaics. We have invested, and we continue to invest, to kind of give the ecosystem and the entrepreneurship ecosystem and the inventors ecosystem the tools needed for them to grow. So the Sharjah Open Innovation Labs, this is a state-of-the-art, let's call it a fast prototyping or makerspace lab, which is like a gym membership for people who like to create things. So in this scale, they can be creating an upstream oil and gas valve, for example, and they'll be able to replicate and make the prototype here at the park before they can scale that. And we can also help them and support them in scaling that technology itself. CAFU is the region's leading mobility and energy delivery app. So they're focusing on the intersection of mobility and energy and what comes about this. So I'm pretty sure that there's many things and applications that they can be used to and develop. They're a very forward-thinking team led by one of the leading businessmen in the region, Rashid Al, and we're really excited to see what comes out from them because they're developing this field further. Last year, we started the autonomous electric piloting, and they're coming back so these technologies themselves, they require a lot of hand-holding, let's say, to get them off the ground and to get them in pilot phase for them to scale and access to the regulators and the supports and getting them the ample support needed for them to scale. And this is exactly what we've been doing here in the park. Nokia will be rolling out their 5G technologies across the park, and our partners, our companies, every single company that's set up here would be able to build their applications on top of this, and even testing different smart cities and IoT applications. The Mensa Labs, which is a state-of-the-art additive manufacturing hub, they're fully functional in our backyard, and they have one of the leading printers when it comes to everything for additive manufacturing, metal, polymers, plastic. And naturally, because of this, we started to build let's say a collection of various very innovative companies that are leading in this field of additive manufacturing, leading to this one, which is MEET. So the Middle East Engineering Technologies, they're in construction printing, and also, if you visit the park in the future, and hopefully some of the attendees would be able to do so, you'll be able to see the physical villa, which is on the bottom left. It's being printed, or it's completely printed outside, and it's also going through various testings and regulation support for them to actually scale this technology and grow. Skyway, which is one of the first anchor pilot projects at the park, which has a considerable investment too, and they've addressing the mass transportation aspect. On the bottom left, you can see the first pod, which was the first pilot, already launched and running for the past year now. Phase 2 and Phase 3 will be up and coming by the end of this year, which span across the whole plot of the park itself. And again, the technologies that we're bringing forth here to the public and through the park is aiming to transform certain industries. So every one of the focal areas that I mentioned earlier, we're trying to disrupt those industries. And we are kind of catalyzing that change in a very seamless and transition way, supporting them with the access to the talent, supporting them with the access to the regulations and business development for them to scale, and as well with access to investors. The United Nations will be setting up their technology innovation lab in the headquarters as well. They go through certain topics which they address using their talent, and they try to see how they can support that using technologies and innovation. We recently launched our own and first accelerator, which was focused on advanced industries. We're happy and we're actually very proud to announce that the application round has been secured. We received over 515 applications from close to 60 countries across the world. This is a fully virtual program, and it's very unique of its type as well, which is why every single one of the companies that applied are extremely unique and extremely innovative, and we are looking forward to interacting with them and seeing what we can do for them to grow across the region. So on a high level, we have achieved quite a lot over the past few years, and we continue to grow. And we're always looking for companies who are, again, forward-thinking, like-minded, and that are interested to tap into our ecosystem so we can support them in commercializing their technologies and scaling their ventures. And we are based on a free zone model, so we support these companies as well to set up their legal entity and structure and grow in the UAE and the region. We have partners, again, as we mentioned, across the region, so we can support them in doing so, and we look forward to growing with them. So I will end my chat. I think I've taken a significant amount of time. I'll kick it off for Shimon to have a say, introduce himself, and then we can kick off to David, and then we'll have a wrap-up discussion to see how we can go. Thank you.
Thanks, Tariq. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, everyone that's joining. My name is Shimon Zaman. I've been a technology executive in the region for the last 15 years, specializing in digital transformations and business transformations. In the last 7 years, I've been in the oil and gas upstream sector. And one of the key things that my previous employer and the people I've worked with, even Silicon Valley, have been looking at is oil and gas, and you know, the value that's pretty much unlocked. As everyone knows, oil and gas is right at the bottom of the curve, of the digital curve. So there's huge value. You know, some speculate it to be from $2 trillion to $3 trillion worth of value there unlocked. Obviously, this is before COVID happened. So my role really at the moment is looking at how do we unlock some of that value. And one area is looking at robotics, industrial robotics, especially now with COVID and what's happened, you know, automating key areas and processes in the oil and gas sector is critically important, because not only does it improve safety, but also increases or improves productivity. Things like digital twins, I think they will be pretty much coming to the fore now, where you know you have a virtual representation of an asset or a product or a process that you can manage, and other things like augmented reality, as Tariq touched. I think that's going to also be a big impact on training and improving safety. and remotely getting things done. We're looking at also drone technology coming in a big way. And I think the UAE had just announced that they're actually creating a kind of environment for drones to operate safely. So that's probably first in the world. So these are the areas that I'm actually very focused on and working with, and hopefully be working with Tariq and what they have in their part to, you know, take that further. So that's really in a nutshell what I'm specializing in or what I'm doing. With that, I'll hand over to David.
Thank you. I actually look forward to getting your insights. I have a couple of questions noted down for you, Shimon, later, and I'm sure from David as well. Thank you. David, would you please try to upload your side? I'm going to stop sharing from my side.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can. If you may just put us in full screen. There we go.
You can see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. My name is David Miller. I'm the TechX Director at the Oil and Gas Technology Centre in Aberdeen in Scotland. So I wanted to kind of give a bit of a flavour of some of the technology trends that we are currently seeing from a UK energy sector standpoint. The centre that I work in has been running for just over 3 years, and we're government funded here to support the acceleration of new technology into the industry. We were originally positioned to support what we would call maximising economic recovery of the UK basin, but as the world has moved on considerably over the last few years, we are also pivoting our support offering towards the net zero decarbonisation standpoint. In 2007, Al Gore wrote his famous book, An Inconvenient Truth, and there was a following documentary which won a number of awards. Over the following years, this led to a huge surge in clean tech, particularly in the US, that saw tens of billions of dollars invested into the space, which ultimately created a huge clean tech bubble that had promising aspirations for the future, but unfortunately, as we know, that bubble ultimately burst. With many of the investors recoiling in terms of the loss of earnings and the lack of traction in the market. The world has moved on considerably since then. As we all know, we're seeing global warming on a huge scale, with some pretty scary predictions in terms of where we're headed. Most of the policies are talking around a 2.5 to 3 degrees temperature rise, and we know that we need to try and reduce that down to about 2 or 1 if we want to staunch the impact that we will feel across the planet if we do and see that temperature rise. The main culprit, of course, being CO2, and as you see here, the task we have ahead of us is pretty huge in terms of the accelerated pace of CO2 reduction that we need to see. Oil and gas industry is a contributor to that. We actually don't see a huge amount of emissions from our E&P activities, but certainly downstream refining and of course use of our products in transportation and heating are a huge contributor to this. So we play a vital role in the energy transition, and we're heavily focused on that from a North Sea standpoint. However, we have a challenge in the technology space here. As this graph shows from the IEA, their recent Clean Energy Innovation Report, when we look at the types of technologies on their current stages in terms of where we are going to see those reductions come from, a lot of the technologies are super early stage, so they're needing a lot of support, they're needing investment to drive them forward. And actually these early stage technologies, which are really, potentially at prototype stage at the moment, or maybe haven't even been invented, will contribute to well over 35% of the emissions reductions that we need to see by 2070. And most of our targets that we're actually aiming for are around 2050, so we really need to get our skates on in this space. Key focus areas that we have, obviously, from our standpoint, is looking at electrification offshore to reduce the need on gas turbines for power generation, carbon capture, utilization and storage, as well as direct air capture for carbon from the air. And then, of course, low carbon hydrogen and low carbon fuels and bioenergy are key important sectors that we really need to focus on. That there's a huge opportunity from a net zero standpoint. If we look at the areas that we're focusing on as an industry, obviously first and foremost it's about trying to reduce the emissions of our oil and gas operations, and that's both upstream, midstream and downstream, and then trying to enable then the transition through to offshore renewable integration, so integrated energy sources like hydrogen, like wind, hydrogen production, leveraging the existing facilities that we have. So we spend billions of dollars putting these facilities out in the ocean. We spend billions of dollars taking them out again. Surely we could spend a few million to repurpose them for better things. And then, of course, industrial scale CCUS and capture is a huge area of focus for us as well. But the market opportunity is sizable. If we look at the bubbles at the bottom under certainly the first one, we see the sort of revenue stream in 2020 around 24 billion based on current oil prices. That will likely reduce to around 11 billion in 2050 as the market reduces. But as we see the other markets coming on stream, there is a huge opportunity in terms of a growing market. And if we look at the very bottom right number comparative to what the industry is worth at the moment, there could be a £50 billion opportunity in the UK from a net zero industry standpoint. So a sizable prize for us to be getting after. As I said, the centre in Aberdeen is purely dedicated in this space, looking at technology, and the programme I run is very much focused on early stage startups. So those early stage companies that are going to be contributing a fair amount of that energy, or that CO2 emission reduction. We really need to be building a high quality pipeline of these companies coming through. And as Tarek said, we work collaboratively across with other partnerships around the world, and we're in conversation with the SRTI Park to see what we can do to collaborate together in this space as well. In terms of what we're seeing from an early stage pipeline standpoint, so the companies we work with are pre-revenue prototype stage, so right in that sweet spot. We've seen a huge shift in terms of the application numbers that we've had through to the programme that we run in Aberdeen. So in terms of the clean tech companies that we've seen from cohort 1 all the way back in 2018 through to the current cohort that we have at the moment, there's been a huge shift both in application numbers of clean tech companies, but also the number of companies that we've selected in our final cohort of 12. So this year, half of our cohort, 6 companies, are full net zero clean tech focused. These are the companies along the bottom. So we have companies like Melozyme Biotechnology that have a unique enzyme that digests plastic, converts it back into its chemical raw materials to allow it to be recycled much more efficiently than any of the current methods at the moment. SHIP is a unique hydrogen electrolyzer that can convert seawater without desalinization into hydrogen, and Supercritical, which is a very unique 3D printed electrolyzer, which is super efficient and really exciting technology in that space. Mission Zero is a direct air capture, carbon capture machine, which is bio-inspired. And then Carno, which is a spin out of Oxford University, has a very unique ceramic engine that's multi-fuel but also super efficient compared to current engines on the market. And then the last one is QLM, which is from Bristol University, and they have a very interesting laser-focused technology for methane identification and quantification, so we can start to identify potential leak sources from a methane standpoint. So a really exciting transition that we're seeing, particularly in the UK in a technology standpoint, but as we've shown earlier, there's a huge amount more that we need to do to build a bigger and deeper pipeline to really meet these CO2 reduction targets that we need as a world, not just from a UK standpoint. And that's me.
Thank you, David. Really exciting stuff. I guess now we can just transition to a more casual conversation, because I got a few questions, and then we can take some from the audience. Personally, David, I think both of you can answer this, and Shimon, I guess you can start off. How have the giants in oil and gas been kind of adapting or integrating with startups or new ventures and technologies? For example, in the healthcare industry, there's a lot of, they buy them out and then they shut them down because they're kind of affecting, or they have a potential to disrupt their own operations, right? I'm guessing today, oil and gas tech giants or energy giants are always going to be looking first for efficiencies. So I guess this is an angle which they're working with, but I'd love to know from your side, and how is that integration happening from the major companies and companies who are up and coming in that field, and kind of disrupting them?
So, Tarek, from my experience, what really happens is, and some of the research we did in this area, is that the giants are actually working in collaboration with disruptors. The disruptors are agile, they're nimble, they can get things done very fast. But when you talk about a big giant, they take time to maneuver, they take time to understand the tech. So working in collaboration actually fast tracks digital innovation. And we've seen, many companies around the globe, the big names, even Saudi Aramco, investing in things like this in the region as well. So it's all done in collaboration. These guys can identify key frictions, not only within the organization itself, but in the industry, and how then to take advantage or create and develop that value further. This is what they look at, and this is how they're working in collaboration with some of the big boys.
David, your 2 cents?
Yeah, so I mean, I would agree. We've seen a big shift in behaviours and willingness from a big oil, if you like, perspective in terms of their willingness to engage with early stage technology companies. I think during the recent rounds of downturn, they've leaned out as best as they can in terms of efficiencies, and are now turning to innovation, technology, and step changes to give them the performance they need to be able to survive, but also in terms of being able to deliver their net zero ambitions, which is a huge narrative shift that we're certainly seeing in the UK. So I think it is easier, and with organisations like ourselves, we are industry led. We have a wide membership with most of the major operators and supply chain in the industry in the UK, and we're here to try and enable that connection between both the end customers and the technology providers. But it isn't without challenge. I think the oil majors do recognise that many of their processes can be quite cumbersome when you come to supply chain and procurement and things like that. Many of them are reviewing those to see if they can prepare light versions of these which are more suitable for startups. Because if you hit a supply chain in a BP, for example, you won't tick many of the boxes that you require to pass go and move forward into the organisation, and that can be a bit of a stumbling block sometimes. But we're seeing willingness to change and adapt, and I don't think these companies would be able to survive long term without a lot of the new technology that's coming through from the early stage companies. They need them, so we need to get better in terms of how we're integrating and collaborating, but the signs are hugely positive.
Agreed. David, you mentioned a very valid point earlier about how these technologies that are up and coming, especially the ones in the early or MVP or scale up stage, that they need a lot of attention, a lot of finance and funding, because it's really hard. Everything that's considered under the deep tech, we see it here at the park. The 50 companies that we have today, all of them are primarily under the deep tech sphere. And we see their pay points. We kind of live it with them as well. We go through all the challenges they face, and we understand how much support they need at any level for them to really scale their technologies, and which is what we're trying to achieve here at the park, right? It's giving them the ideal ecosystem to kind of flourish and grow. A question was from the others around the sustainability or the environmentally friendly type of impact. Do you think what happened over the past couple of months accelerated these tech giants, their agenda to kind of spur environmental change? I guess we can go again with the format of Shimon's first, and then followed by David's input.
I think we are seeing obviously the diversification into wind and clean energy. If you look at in Europe, they're talking at trillions of dollars investment in developing more wind farms. And we're seeing some of the giants in the region actually taking some of that work. So there is a clear focus. The tech is still catching up with the clean energy sector, but there are really great startups that are actually joining forces and looking at ways to improve how to maintain and manage those new assets that have been developed for the wind sector. So that's really my view on that.
David?
Yeah, so I mean, we started to see a big shift in narrative before, I guess, the impact from a COVID-19 perspective that kind of kicked in over the last few months. So there was a lot of plans in progress already with many of the majors announcing, publicly, the likes of BP, Equinor, Shell, and others in terms of their aspirations. I think, yeah, obviously the COVID impact and the downturn, we've had a triple whammy, obviously, here, particularly in the UK, with the downturn in the industry plus COVID-19 has had a huge impact on the industry, not from a positive standpoint. A lot of people losing their jobs and facing redundancy, which is really tough for the industry in the region. But there is a lot of focus now, particularly from a government standpoint and an industry standpoint, that as we start to recover and come out of this, that we have even more focus from a net zero decarbonisation standpoint. So I think, yeah, it will certainly accelerate plans. I think money that was earmarked from an investment standpoint is still very much there and being focused on, but there are a lot of other challenges that these organisations are facing just now with the general economics they have with their facilities and some of the projects that they may have sanctioned which are no longer sanctioning, and what they're going to be focusing on in the future with their further investment. But certainly net zero is firmly on the agenda, which is good to see, but we really need to start opening the taps in terms of what we're investing in and driving these technologies forward.
Thank you. A question. So I'll ask Shimon from a question from a regional perspective, because you've spent significant time in one of the leading entities here in the UAE, specifically in a division which is forward-thinking and let's say the innovative brain of the company. What do you think today of the current standpoint? What is needed to kind of accelerate this whole change towards a more conscious operation in terms of making it easier for up and coming innovations to kind of flourish?
I think before COVID, the oil and gas, as you know, industry was going for a battering because of oversupply, and then COVID just made the whole thing 10 times worse. So prior to that, the focus really was on how do we improve productivity? How can we reduce costs and keep the margins, protect the margins as much as possible? Now with what's happened, and as David alluded, a lot of people losing their jobs. It's all about how can you actually operate as lean as possible and efficiently and safely. So technology, it's going to play a fundamental role in doing that. And companies that previously were very slow to adopt or to act, now they're seeing, the value of having this kind of technology. I mean, one thing COVID has shown that we can actually move at lightning speed if we really want to. And that lightning speed will come through collaboration with startups. Those guys, I mean, I'm doing startup myself. I know you have to move fast, you have to be lean, agile, and operate efficiently, effectively, and add value to whoever you work with. So that kind of mindset, it's not just about bringing technology, it's also bringing a new mindset of how things can be done more efficiently, quickly, to survive. It's all about survival now. I think digital technology, focusing in the right kind of areas such as green energy, this is what's happening, and this is what's going to continue happening in my opinion.
Great. And David, I mean, you guys are a little bit ahead of the timeline when it comes to forward-thinking innovation. So what are the trends that you're seeing today, and what do you think is the near to medium term, let's say, timeline for what's coming next? What type of trends do you see up and coming?
So, I mean, as Shimon said, we see digital transformation as being a huge trend across the industry as a whole. We're seeing that particularly in the North Sea. So a lot of the projects that we have focused in that space is around data analytics, machine learning, automation, robotics. So Shimon said, looking for efficiency gains, looking at better decision making, look at reducing cost uncertainty. Some of the processes in oil and gas are still a bit of a black art. We've got a huge amount of data resource that we don't utilize. So there's a huge shift in terms of trying to collate that data and using a pool of UK data from an industry perspective to aid better decision making in terms of maintaining margins and finding new pay or whatever that might be. So that's really exciting to see. There's some really cool stuff happening in that space. But also there's a huge amount going on from an asset integrity standpoint. We have a very mature basin. It's pretty harsh environment. Facilities which are well beyond their design life cycle. So asset integrity and smart sensors, and again data analytics and being able to spot corrosion using machine vision and things like that is a really interesting trend that's going on just now. And decommissioning, obviously. So as a lot of the facilities are coming to the end of their field life, economics maybe not stacking up with current oil price, we're seeing the decommissioning market start to grow again. So again, looking at how we can reduce the burden of cost in that space, or is there a repurposing opportunity from a net zero standpoint? And then net zero is the next one. So a huge surge in activity in this space, particularly in the northeast of Scotland, looking at electrification offshore, looking at hydrogen production, energy hubs, and even the city of Aberdeen here, where I'm based, have set their stall out from a net zero standpoint, looking looking at, we have our full fleet of buses are all hydrogen, our garbage trucks are hydrogen powered, and looking at what else we can do as a city in a region to set our stall out as a net zero city, supporting a net zero oil and gas basin in the North Sea. So a lot of really exciting stuff going on. It is really positive to see. But in terms of the grander scale of the climate crisis, if you like, that there is a huge amount more work we need to do to be able to build the ecosystem we need to drive a lot of that forward.
Very well. Thank you for that. So, David, how do you guys manage the whole triple helix, which is the collaboration between the government and the private sector? And is there an integration as well from the academic and that talent perspective? I asked this to learn from you guys because this is exactly the same journey we're going through currently.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a challenge. Our stakeholder mix is pretty complex. So we are government funded. So we are funded both by the UK and Scottish government. We're a private entity, so that makes it slightly easier in terms of the governance we have around the funding. But it's public funding, so we have to be very clear and concise in terms of how we are investing that. And obviously we work closely with both governments. We work very closely with the industry to make sure that we're industry led, that we understand their challenges and needs, because there's no point spending all this money on technology if the industry isn't going to pull it through and help it commercialize. So we work very closely with industry to make sure that they're supporting all of the projects that we have going. And then, working very closely with research and development institutes, working with academia across Scotland, UK and internationally. For my program, for example, we've been working very closely with a number of universities that have some exciting spin-out programs, particularly that are potentially energy focused, so that we can provide a line of sight from some of the research that's potentially getting commercialized and spun out, that our program is an opportunity for them to get all the way through to field trial, demonstrate its success, and then hopefully get them invested in and moved forward. So yeah, we have touch points all over the place, and then you have a number of the other Innovate UK institutes, the catapults, and various other organisations that we also try and build relationships with. It's all about trying to provide all those stepping stones that these companies need to get commercially success and get into the industry with the technology, because unless it's deployed at scale, it's not going to add value. So it's really important that we're connecting all those dots up, and we're trying our best to do that.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing how we can collaborate. And speaking of Catapult, we did a report with them a couple of months ago when we first started to kick off around why Sharjah is an ideal ecosystem to really stimulate and foster the deep tech innovation space for the next couple of years, and we appreciate your insight too. I guess we can start wrapping up the conversation. I'm not sure if Shimon, you have a few touch points. You've been transitioning from straight into the belly of a leading oil and gas company into the field of entrepreneurship and taking a leap into kicking off. I'm not sure how you can kind of relay some of that insight and let's say experience or learning curves for you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate to work for one of a really great company that's UK listed, but operates mainly in Sharjah at the moment, which is Lamprell PLC. I left them in January. And, one of the key things I see is the friction in the industry. Digital transformation is ripe in oil and gas, and working in academia. I mean, myself, I'm now closely collaborating with MIT to bring some of that great stuff that they've actually, looked at that can be commercialized and scaled. And I think, I really love the fact that Tarek, what you guys are doing and the close association with the universities and what David was saying as well, it's critical for success. So there's a lot of learnings, not just having the industry experience, but also understanding how to look at key frictions that has huge scale. And I think oil and gas has a huge opportunity. They need to transition now, become much more leaner, meaner to survive. And that's where digital tech will really play a huge part. And this is why I felt that, this was the right time to come in and help an industry, that is going through a very challenging period. But for every challenge, there's always an opportunity, and this is the opportunity, and this is the time. And hence, this is why I'm really into robotics and digital transformation and looking at many different techs that can come into the industry and help it to survive. and develop and create more value in the long term, and transition into more green energy and those kinds of areas.
Thank you. I guess we can wrap up the conversation rather to keep it a little bit of a short and insightful session. I truly enjoyed it. I appreciate your insights. David, Shimon, look forward to integrating and collaborating with you in the near future. Shimon, you're much closer to us. You're also based in Sharjah, so salam. Once again, David, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. We really appreciate your time. Again, always keep up to date with what we're up to. We always try to educate and engage with our audience, whether they're startups or corporates or students, and we're here to build connections, and feel free to reach out. I will type my email, or you can reach out, actually, the email at the bottom, which is events@srtip.ae. Feel free to reach out. Any questions, any inquiries, we're here to listen. We're here to support. Once again, gentlemen, thank you for your time. And good luck. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Bye-bye.
Okay, guys.